for people who haven't been able to join us. So you will have a little thing on your screen. If you're shy about being recorded, you can turn your video off. And now I'm going to pass it on to Sharon Forte and Tony Crocamo to provide us with the program. Thank you all for being here. Sharon, you're muted.
All right, thank you, Jean. And now I would like to introduce tonight's presenter, Tony Crocamo. Tony represents Fair Districts, Pennsylvania, FDPA, a fiscal project of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania since 2015. FDPA is a nonpartisan coalition of citizens and organizations seeking to reform Pennsylvania's redistricting rules and make the process of drawing districts impartial, transparent, and accountable. Following a career of providing marketing services for international engineering and design firms, Tony now represents FDPA redistricting educational presentations statewide and trains FDPA members on how to lobby state legislators. A former West Hempfield Township supervisor, Tony is a rostered teaching artist with the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts and lives in Lancaster County. Today, he will review how the procedural rules that govern the legislative process have broken Harrisburg and why changing those rules is the critical first step needed to fix Harrisburg. Please welcome Tony Crocamo.
Oh, thank you very much, Sharon. I appreciate that. You know, this group was the last group I spoke to in person. I believe it was October 2019, 2020. I forget the years meld together, before the pandemic. And I can remember sitting around in a restaurant after the presentation, which was very well attended. And we're still trying to figure out whether to bump fists or bump elbows or what, which I've learned how to do both by now. I just wanted everybody to know that I am trainable. I've improved. So today we're going to talk about how Harrisburg should work. And we're going to discuss Harrisburg, the reality, how it works, or more accurately, how it doesn't work. And I'm going to talk about a core problem. I'm not suggesting it's the only hole in the boat in Harrisburg, but I am suggesting that this problem needs to be fixed before others, because the others can't be fixed until we fix this problem. I'm going to talk about what that fix is and action items that you can do to help us get there. So, Harrisburg, the intent, the way it's supposed to work. We, the people, elect 3 co-equal branches of government. There are about 9 million registered voters in Pennsylvania, and in general elections, we elect our branches of government, the legislative, judicial, and executive. The legislative enacts laws. Judicial interprets the laws, and the executive, in addition to running the state through the Department of the State and the Department of Health and the state police and all those administrative offices, in addition to administering the state, they also enforce the laws. So those are the 3 co-equal branches of government. This is a review of the legislative process, the way it is supposed to work. And I'm sorry if this is basic for many of you. I'll go through it quickly. But every law, every bill starts as an idea. You know, somebody somewhere says, this ought to be a law. So that's the idea. That idea may originate with the public. It could originate with a PAC. It could originate with an interest group. It could originate within a political party, with a legislator. There are many sources of the idea for legislation. And if you convince a legislator that the bill can be introduced, that legislator will have a bill drafted by staff, and that bill will be reviewed by lawyers to make sure that it doesn't contradict existing law, and they'll look for other problems and other things so that it is a viable bill. And then that bill is referred to the committee. Now we have 2 chambers in Harrisburg, the State House and the State Senate. And it doesn't matter which chamber originates the bill. You go through the same process in both chambers. So let's say, just for simplicity, this starts in the House. The bill drafted, you have a primary sponsor. It's assigned by, depending on the content of the bill, what it's about, to an appropriate committee. And then there are supposed to be committee hearings, and the bill is debated, discussed, amended, and can be voted on. If it is voted out of committee, it goes to the floor. It goes to the floor in the first chamber, where it should be put on an agenda, discussed, debated, amended, and voted on. If it passes that chamber, it goes through the exact same process in the other chamber. House bills that pass out of committee hearings and pass off and are voted out of off the floor go to the Senate. And in the Senate, they're sent to an appropriate committee, put on the agenda, supposed to be discussed, voted on. If it's voted out of committee, it goes to the floor for discussion, debate, amendment. And if it passes that second chamber, it goes to the governor. Now, the governor may sign the bill, and if the governor does, that bill becomes law. If the governor vetoes the bill, then the bill goes back to the chamber of origin. If that veto is overridden by 2/3 majority, the bill moves to the second chamber for its reconsideration. If not, if it doesn't pass those two chambers again, the bill dies. That's the process, the way it's supposed to work. The reality in Harrisburg. In 2017, 2018, and 2019, 2020, more than 5,600 bills were introduced in each of those sessions. 5,600 bills. In the 2017, 2018 session, 281 bills passed. Went to committee, voted out of committee, onto the floor, voted off, made it, voted to, went to the other chamber, committee, voted on, discussed on the floor, made it, signed by the governor. 281 bills passed. That's 5% of all the bills. 2019, 2020, 5,699 bills, 325 passed, 5.7%. Now, that is not very much. And we're going to talk about why so few get through. Over 93% of the bills go nowhere. 93% of the bills go nowhere. And by the way, the latest figures I have, complete figures, are through 2019, 2020. The current sessions are 2 years. The current session started in 2021. So we finished 2021, we have 2022. We're not quite done yet. The numbers are about the same. No significant difference this year, and it hasn't been significant. There's been very few changes in this pattern in the last decade or so. Pennsylvania's full-time legislature is the largest legislature in the country. Largest full-time legislature in the country. It is one of the most expensive. Only California and New York have more expensive legislatures than do we. And it is among the least productive, as far as 93% of the bills going nowhere. That is a trifecta of dysfunction. 73% of bills never get a vote in committee. They don't get a vote in committee. They may not even get on the agenda in the committee. So you have all this time and effort put into these bills, all these attorneys looking at the bills, all this money and expense, multiple copies made, distributed to everybody, and it's all going to go to the landfill. 30% of the 2019-2020 House bills passed out of committee, never got a floor vote. Okay, if 73% of the bills never get a vote in committee, then you have 30% of the ones that do get a vote and pass. They get out. They don't get a vote on the floor. They just die there. 50% of the bills that pass one chamber don't get a vote in the other chamber. Now consider this. You have one of the chambers, the House or the Senate, representing the majority of Pennsylvanians. If the bill passes and it doesn't get a vote in the other chamber, that's It's untenable. It's an incredible disrespect for one house for the other, and I may well share their opinion of each other, but still, this is not professional behavior, and it's not productive. Now, I want to be clear. Fair districts and I are not claiming all 5,699 of those bills were worth the paper they were written on. Some good bills in there, including ones that fair districts supported and promoted, some very bad bills. We're not suggesting they all should become law, they all should pass. We are suggesting a lot of them are puffery. They're not going to go anywhere. The legislator knows it's not going to go anywhere. So he or she gets to write a bill in favor of motherhood and apple pie and say, hey, look at this bill. I'm the main sponsor of this bill for motherhood and apple pie. Aren't I wonderful? And they put it in their newsletter, and they know the bill's not going to get even looked at in the chamber. It's puffery. It becomes a PR piece. It's a line item in their newsletter to constituents. And we poor constituents, we think the legislature is working, functioning properly. You know, we know there's some problems and they may be inefficient, but most of us have not been aware that 93% of the bills proposed die, don't go anywhere, never had a chance. Nobody even intended them to have a chance. It's a sham. So the reality in Harrisburg, and this is why difficult problems in Pennsylvania do not get addressed. It's sort of a reality of politics. And Tim, there are going to be portions of this you aren't going to be pleased with. But there's a reality in politics that politicians tend to want to be liked. And if you take a difficult vote on a difficult issue, well, a chunk of your constituents are not going to like you. It's a difficult thing to do, but we the people send the legislators to Harrisburg to make these difficult decisions. But they don't have to, because the party bosses, the party leadership, controls the process and protects members from having to take these difficult votes, which may well be a reason why so many members vote for these rules that govern the process, even though those rules prevent them from representing their constituents. So any one of 6 majority party leaders under the rules can single-handedly block any bill for any reason. The bill can be blocked because it's from the wrong party. The bill can be blocked because one legislator doesn't like the other legislator, doesn't like the cut of his jib or the look of his tie, whatever. Doesn't have to give a reason. Any one of these people can block any bill. The House Committee Chair. The House Committee Chair is in full control of the agenda for that committee. If that chair does not want a bill to see the light of day, that chair does not put the bill on the agenda. That's it. It never gets discussed. It never gets amended. It doesn't get a hearing. You don't have witnesses called. We're not talking about the merits of the legislation. We're talking about a House Committee Chair that rules with a whim of iron. He or she gets to do what he or she wants to do, and it doesn't matter what the rest of the legislature wants to do, and it doesn't matter what the people of Pennsylvania want. House Majority Leader. If a bill gets out of committee and the House Majority Leader doesn't want it to go any further, it doesn't. That's it. It doesn't. Speaker of the House controls the agenda of the House, can stop it. Senate Committee Chair, the same power as the House Committee Chair. Senate Committee Chair doesn't like the bill, doesn't want it to see the light of day, won't even put it on the agenda. It won't be discussed. It won't be amended. It doesn't stand a chance. Not because it's not good legislation, because the Senate Committee Chair doesn't like it. We have had, Fair Districts had a House Committee Chair who said redistricting reform, and he was in charge of the committee where our bill was. He said redistricting reform was never going to get out of his committee, and it didn't. We have a current committee chair who has said red flag laws will not get out of his committee, and they haven't. Red flag laws would be responsible gun legislation to keep weapons out of the hands of people who could harm themselves or others, or a danger to themselves or others. A temporary, you go through the courts for a temporary restraining order, take their weapons away temporarily until they're fit to own them again. Very popular legislation in the state. Committee chair has said, nah, not going to happen. Doesn't matter what the state wants. Doesn't matter what the rest of the legislature wants. That committee chair says it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Senate Majority Leader has the same power. Controls the agenda in the Senate. Senate President has that same influence. Any one of these 6 party leaders, majority party leaders, can block any legislation, any reason. Now, we elect representatives to represent us. They go to Harrisburg, and they can't. When you have 6 people with this much power, can it really be said that Pennsylvania has a representative democracy? I contend that Putin would be very comfortable with this style of government, except he would eliminate maybe 5 of those positions and just have it his. Does Pennsylvania have a representative democracy? I would argue no. And I'd love to hear any arguments to the contrary. I want to give you an example, Fair District's example, of the support we had, the bipartisan support we had for redistricting reform. It was legislative and public support. We had over 100,000 petition signatures. We did over 1,100 public presentations attended by 43,000 people. We had bipartisan resolutions passed in 389 governing bodies, including 23 counties. We had Republican-led municipalities and Republican-led counties and Democratic-led municipalities and Democratic-led counties signing our resolution, passing resolutions in favor of redistricting reform. Those governing bodies, 9 million of Pennsylvania's 13 million people lived in those municipalities and counties, and we couldn't get anything done. There were thousands of calls, emails, letters, and postcards. Many of you probably wrote those emails, made those calls, and sent those letters and postcards. Hundreds of in-person and Zoom meetings with legislators. We had requests for visits in every legislative district. There were some legislators that did not want to talk to us, which brings me back to the do we have a representative democracy when a legislator refuses to meet with the people he or she is supposed to represent? Not so much. Public comment and support, hundreds of editorials, letters to the editor. We had media support. We had 1,500 news articles, almost all of them in support of redistricting reform. There was a statewide poll that indicated 66% of Pennsylvanians supported redistricting reform, and 67% wanted an independent citizens commission to draw the lines for the state legislative districts. With all that support, our bill was never allowed a floor vote in the House or Senate. It was gutted in the House, and it just didn't go anywhere. Essentially because of one legislator, the chair of the House committee. So with 93% of bills going nowhere, Harrisburg is essentially a no passing zone. And you think of the important issues we face in Pennsylvania, lead exposure in our water. There are, I believe, 18 cities in Pennsylvania with lead levels in the water system higher than that of Flint, Michigan. And the legislature hasn't been able to do anything about that. School funding, I mean, that is in the courts now because the legislature has failed to act. Property tax reform, which is an issue obviously tied to equitable school funding. You're going to hear about property tax reform again. It's an election cycle. You're going to hear about it, but I'm telling you, unless the rules change, nothing's going to be done. Surprise medical bills. Now, the federal legislation recently passed addresses this, but in Pennsylvania, nothing had been done on that. Minimum wage. Another huge family issue important to rural areas. Nothing. Political issues, legislator ethics, and a gift ban. Very popular with the public. The public wants a gift ban. They understand that you don't want lobbyists to be able to buy votes. Going nowhere. No matter how popular it is with the public, that legislation goes nowhere. And I'm talking like for 10 years, going nowhere. Open primaries, another big issue. Many people would like to have open primaries. No legislation goes anywhere. Ballot access issues are hugely important now more than ever. And you know, the good side of that, opening up access to the ballot, that's going to be a tough row to hoe. I don't think they're going to do anything on that. Closing access to ballot, making it more difficult to vote, seems to have an easier path, even though it's not as popular. And minority legislation gets ignored. There are rural issues. We have a legislature that represents a good chunk of rural Pennsylvania, and you know, things like broadband access haven't been addressed. Nurse practitioners, health care services in rural areas across our country is becoming more and more of an important issue. It's difficult to get health care in those areas. There are fewer doctors, they're further apart, fewer hospitals. So things like having nurse practitioners who are trained and capable of taking over some of what had been physician responsibilities, you want to have standards set in place for those. That's gone nowhere. Healthcare staffing, making sure you have adequate staffing in hospitals and in nursing homes and elsewhere for the number of people being treated is an important issue, and it hasn't been addressed in Pennsylvania. Telehealth, which would also be useful in rural areas, it's been a significant benefit to those states that have that. We don't have any standards on that. So why don't these bills get debated and voted? I mean, Pennsylvania has real problems that need to be addressed, and they do not get addressed. They get lip service. Certainly during elections, people talk about them, and they get to Harrisburg, and nothing gets done. Because the rules govern the process. The rules are written by the majority party leaders. The rules give the majority party leaders control over the process. One committee chair outweighs the House and the Senate and the will of the people. This creates unchecked power and a dangerous imbalance. Again, it is not a representative democracy. And in Harrisburg, you often hear the majority party and others scream about transparency and accountability, and they're usually pointing the finger at the administration. And they may have some points, they can't be wrong about everything, but where's the transparency and the ability and the accountability in their process? There was one state legislator leadership who was complaining of the temerity of Governor Wolf vetoing, I think he vetoed maybe 12, less than two dozen bills. And it was suggesting that this is a terrible thing to do, that it thwarts the will of the people, a governor vetoing a couple dozen pieces of legislation. And then you stop and consider, well, this party leader, by refusing to schedule votes on bills, has single-handedly vetoed hundreds and hundreds of bills that never got a hearing. So it's bad when one person vetoes 12 or 18 or how many it was bills, but it's okay for that person to essentially veto hundreds. And by the way, his complaint doesn't take into account that the governor is voted in office by the entire state, the majority of the Pennsylvanians voting in that election, whereas that gentleman who killed single-handedly hundreds and hundreds of bills was voted in with less than 0.05% of the vote of the people of Pennsylvania. So there is, I don't know if it's blinders or a double standard or a combination of blinders and double standard. That's probably correct. But there's no transparency, there's no accountability in this process, and truly, it's difficult to say we have a representative democracy. So the rules are written by the leadership, and they introduce the rules on the first day of each new session, which is coming up in January. Before voting on the rules, the legislators vote to prohibit amendments to the rules. Now think about that. The rules have yet to be introduced, and the first bit of business they do is vote on a resolution that prohibits amending the rules that they haven't even enacted yet. With that vote, the lawmakers surrender their ability to represent us. Now, some of the lawmakers might be rookies, and maybe they didn't know that the rules were going to prevent them from getting a bill out of committee. In fact, that's forgivable that they didn't know. I didn't know. But it's our job to make sure that the newly elected legislators know that if they vote for these unfair rules, they are silencing their voice and their ability to represent us. So they're silencing our voice. The rules give the majority party absolute control. And by the way, when the Democrats, in the last 20 years, I think the Democrats had majority rule in both houses for several years. And when they did the same thing that the Republicans do. It was just the numbers are inverted. The number of Democratic bills was very, very high, and the number of Republican bills passed very, very low. So it's the same. Both parties do this. Both parties, and I don't want to break anybody's heart, but the major parties, Republicans and Democrats, at the state level, state leadership level, I maintain are not interested in governing. They are interested in power. I'm not sure why, but it's just, they are interested in power. That's the most important thing. Getting power, holding power, wielding power. And it's not necessarily power to do good. There's no give and take in this form of government. There's no consensus. There's no collaboration. You know, I've been around for a while. I'm old enough to start giving my age in Celsius now. By the way, I'm 21.7 Celsius. And I have heard Republican legislation, Republican ideas that I thought were good. I've heard Republican ideas I thought were terrible. I've heard Democratic ideas I thought were good. I've heard Republican ideas I thought were terrible. What we're supposed to do is have that debate, have that argument, and take the best of each and cobble something together. And maybe everybody doesn't get what they want, but you get the best of both. And what we have now is the worst of both. So under the rules, majority party leaders select committee chairs. Chairs control the agenda. Minority party has no say in what bills get a vote. So some of you may remember W.C. Fields. And there was a movie he made, My Little Chickadee with Mae West. And there was one scene where he's a carnival. He's working a carnival, and he's working a wheel of fortune. And he's spinning the wheel, and a rube comes up to him, country bumpkin comes up to him and says, "Is this a game of chance?" And Field says, "Not the way I play it, no." That's what we have in Harrisburg. There is no chance for legislation to get through. Legislative rules written by the majority party give them complete control, and none shall pass. It doesn't have to be this way. There are several states, I believe 4, that have 100% rating for best practices for collaboration, for collaborative policymaking. And that's given by the Fair Vote and Bipartisan Policy Center. 100% fairness rating. They have processes that promote collaboration. Colorado is one of them. And I just want to compare Colorado's redistricting process to ours. Now, the League of Women Voters has been working on redistricting in Pennsylvania for decades. For decades, they've been working on redistricting. Fair districts has been around for 6 years. Colorado's bill passed in less than a month. Pennsylvanians didn't get a hearing in 6 years with fair districts working on it. So, joint bills were introduced for redistricting reform in Colorado on April 18th, 2018. It was amended in committee in May 5th and 7th. passed unanimously on May 16th, and went to voter referendum in November, and it passed with 71% of the vote. So this legislation, which was very popular with the people of Colorado, got through the legislature in less than a month. Introduced April 18th, passed unanimously May 16th. And that's why Colorado has 100% agenda fairness rating. Pennsylvania's rating by the same organization, 0. We have no collaborative processes in Harrisburg. If the current rules prevent our voices from being heard, then we must change the rules. And this is what we want. And tell me if this sounds to be radical. You know, all we're saying is bipartisan bills should get a vote in committee, on the floor, and in both chambers. Now, you're saying, well, how are they going to handle 5,600 bills? You know, they're not. If they really have to address the bills that have bipartisan support, or to be addressed, to guarantee them being addressed, they need bipartisan support, there's going to be a lot fewer bills written. If the bills are going somewhere, the bills are going to be more serious. They're going to be about real issues, real problems, and not just puffery that looks good in the legislator's newsletter once a month. So we want bipartisan bills to get a vote in committee, on the floor, and in both chambers. Yeah, it's a heavy lift, very heavy lift. And as Carol Kernholm likes to say, you know, she's quoting Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Getting political leaders, political party bosses to give up power, they're not going to hand it over. We have to take it away from them. And it's up to the legislators to take it away from them by not voting for unfair rules. So how are we going to get this done? Well, we did accomplish some stuff. I mean, party leaders used the rules to block redistricting reform, and I showed you all that information before. However, because of the League of Women Voters, for its decades of work, and the Committee of 70, and Common Cause, and Fair Districts PA, and other organizations, we were able to raise the public's awareness on this issue. And because of that, because there were so many eyes on this issue, the process we had this year involved more public hearings and participation than ever before. Yeah, we didn't change the law. I know we didn't change the law, but because of all that effort, we got better maps. And we didn't have our hand on any of the levers of government in order to do that. We did that. All of us did that. All of these organizations did that by just talking about this issue, making this issue known statewide, writing letters to the editor, letting the legislature know we're watching what you're doing. That effort led to better maps. And better maps means a more responsive legislature. This cycle, we have more open districts where we don't have an incumbent running than we've had in decades. So more open districts can lead to new legislators. New legislators could, I think I'm going to change that to should, resist surrendering their power and our voices. People running now for the first time from both parties may not be aware of this. May not be aware that when they vote for the rules, they're giving up their ability to represent their constituents. They're giving up their ability to get a bill out of committee. You know, conditions for change are more favorable now than ever. But we've got to make some noise about this. And I hope you consider joining Fix Harrisburg. You can text Fix Harrisburg, or text 9423 Fix Harrisburg, or you can scan this code. I'll leave it up for a while, and visit fixharrisburg.com. There's a lot of information there. If somebody needs this slide again, I'll come back to it if you need it. But citizenship is a contact sport. Request a speaker. Review and sign the Fixed Harrisburg resolution. And I'll show you how to do that and how to request a speaker in a moment. Write letters to the editor. Spread the word about Fix Harrisburg. Talk to family members, talk to co-workers, and above all, talk to the candidates. I would love it. I would love it if at every town hall meeting, every Zoom meeting a candidate has, every campaign event, there was somebody in the audience asking candidates, do you favor rules reform? Where do you stand on rules reform? Do you support allowing amendments to legislative rules? Would you vote against rules that prevent you from representing us? Shouldn't bills with bipartisan support get a vote in committee and on the floor and in both chambers? I would love it if at every campaign event there was somebody in the audience asking these kinds of questions. Find out where they stand. Get them to pledge that they won't vote for rules which forces them to surrender their ability to represent you, their constituents. Call, write, visit your state representative or your state senator. Now, again, citizenship is a contact sport. When it comes to contact, sending an email is okay. Better is sending a postcard, and maybe a little bit better, making a phone call. The best, though, is actually scheduling a visit. And you can do a Zoom visit or you can visit in person. And fair districts, I can offer free training, a free workshop on how to conduct a lobby visit, and it's a non-confrontational team approach to lobbying where you have 3 to 5 people from your organization that go to the legislator, and it's non-confrontational, it's values-based, it's based on the Friends Committee on National Legislation, the Quakers, so non-confrontational, Quakers, their approach to lobbying, and it's very successful. I've been doing it for years. We've talked to the advocacy team in Fair Districts PA and other groups, and it's working out pretty well. So again, you want to tell your legislators that you want them to be able to represent us. We want rules that encourage collaboration. We want bipartisan bills to get votes in committee, on the floor, and in both chambers. And you can volunteer with fixharrisburg.com, and we're looking for people to sign. Well, we're looking for petition signatures and people interested in data gathering and data entry, getting involved in local groups, community outreach, campaigns and projects. And I'll just show you this. Whoop, that was unfortunate. Let's see here. I was doing so well. You can go to fixharrisburg.com, and this is what you're going to see. Unfair rules, slam the door on bipartisan solutions. And if you scroll down a little bit, you come to this, and you can sign the petition, learn more. There is a wealth of information here. And that's one great thing about Fair Districts and Fix Harrisburg and League of Women Voters. If you need good information for a lobby visit, so you can talk with confidence and knowledgeably and know when the other side is blowing smoke, the materials are there. You can go into a meeting with confidence that you have the facts. You can request a speaker, and you can volunteer.
Excuse me, Tony.
Yes.
This is Julie Becker. We're looking at one of the slides. I'm not sure we're on the website. If you're on the website directing us around.
All right. I'll tell you what, I have a fix for that. My next slide is just in case the website doesn't work. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. So if you go to the fixharrisburg.com website, scroll down a little bit, and you'll come to this fixture here. And what you can do, you can sign a petition, learn more, request a speaker, or volunteer. So thank you very much for letting me know that that wasn't working. And I feel real proud that I had this ready to go. And that's volunteer. There we go. So no matter what single issue. Oh, by the way, that's the great thing about the lobby information. Whatever issue you want to meet about, that lobby approach works. So no matter what single issue is important to you, if we don't have a responsive legislator, it doesn't matter. Nothing changes unless this changes. Can you see how it's impossible to get reform through the legislature under these rules? It can't be done. They're not going to give up power. And these rules just entrench that power. And so we have to embarrass them. The leadership's going to write the rules, but we've got to convince new legislators not to vote for these rules. So I can take questions, and I'm going to go here. We can leave that up while during the questions. And I'm going to see if there are any questions in chat.
There were
And
no
we have, okay. Anybody want to ask our two potential legislators what their stand is on the rules? Matt McLeod for Senate District 10 and Tim Brenneman for House District 29. You guys want to tell us what you're going to do?
Yeah, I see the value in trying to have rules that allow more collaboration. So, you know, I'm certainly willing to consider that. I know one of my big concerns that gravitate me here is redistricting reform, and it's been so hard to see that progress. And having written about it, you know, it does seem like legislators want to control the process, and you know, that's been the problem for 200 years. So until we find ways to have people have a more direct voice in the process of districting, legislators are always going to take control of it. So yeah, I do see the value.
Yeah, but Tim, my point would be redistricting didn't go through because of the rules. Nothing goes, no reform can get through because of the rules. And unless and until, and I'm not a voter in your district, but I'm disappointed to hear you kind of soft on this. Consider the trouble you're going to go through to get elected. And say you get elected, God bless you. I mean, knocking on all those doors, doing all that work, and you get to Harrisburg and you can't do anything because of the rules. You can't represent.
And like I said, I would like to see more bipartisanship in the rules. So I mean,
well, I mean, I still don't understand why you'd be so soft in this. We're talking about rules that mean we don't have a representative democracy. And if you think we do anyway, tell me how. Show me where I'm wrong. We don't have a representative democracy. And the fact that you're running and that doesn't incense you.
No, I mean, you know, you see, you know, I'd like to, I do want to learn the process, and that's what I'm here for today. And I mean, I would expect to look at it and study it. And, you know, I want to see more bipartisan bills passed. I've written about, you know, these types of issues for decades. So, I mean, it's a concern. So, I mean, I want to make sure that I'm doing those things, but I want to make sure I'm studying them too.
But it's a good thing not to be rash. My email address is, and please write this down, is Tony 205 Hawk, Hawk, @gmail.com. If in your studying this issue, you find that I have a factual error here, or I've misrepresented anything, please let me know, and I promise you I will correct the presentation.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I attended here today because I was interested in it, and because I've worked on redistricting reform for, you know, 20 years, drafting a proposed amendment to the PA Constitution. I definitely want to have solutions. I want to make sure that we do more to encourage civics. I want to have, you know, young people getting more involved. You know, I'm supporting bills with, you know, 16-year-olds getting involved. So, or pre-registering. You know, I was actually, you know, working, you know, in the last election cycle in 2020, litigating against Donald Trump when he's attacking our process. But you know, I'm interested in these rules, and I'm not. I haven't gotten to Harrisburg yet, so you know, it's hard for me to say exactly before I've even gotten there. But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm here, is because I have an interest in that. So
yeah, no, it's you, and it's you don't want to be blindsided by having some guy you never heard of before give you a presentation and say, oh yeah, that's true. You know, so that's it's fine being prudent. That's smart to be prudent. But again, if you find I've made any error or misrepresentation, please let me know. Now,
like, for example, Steve Samuelson. Steve Samuelson's a person who I would model the type of legislator I'd want to be. Steve, you know, he supported, I guess it was House Bill 22 in the last cycle. Steve has for years supported good government initiatives, and you listed a laundry list of ones that I would support. What did Steve do on the rules? And Steve has been an ally of Fair District. Steve has been an ally of the League of Women Voters. What did Steve do? Just curious.
I'm not certain of Steve's vote, and I should know it, but he does support rules reform, and it is an aspect of working in Harrisburg that has frustrated him.
And if there was someone who I would sort of model the type of legislator that I'd want to be, it's after someone like Steve. And Steve has for years known just about everything that's going on in the legislature, has stood for good government bills. I talked to him a few months ago, and that's exactly what I said. I hope to be a legislator like the type of legislator that you are. So, to say exactly what I do, I certainly think we need rules reform. I think we need to make it easier when the majority of Pennsylvanians are saying that they want to see a bill passed, and we have leadership standing in the way. That certainly is a problem. But I don't know anything about Harrisburg. I know the type of legislator I want to be, and I think I would probably closely model it off of the way Steve conducts himself.
Well, it sounds like the rules as they currently are and will be, unless people vote against them, would get in the way of you being the legislator you want to be. Okay, 10% of bill gets passed. It suggests that at least 50% of the cost of legislation is fruitless. Yeah, that has to be over $100 million a year. Okay, she'd love to see, the question is basically, she'd love to see analysis of the cost to introduce 5,000 bills a year. The figure I have is $70 million for not just publishing all those, because every legislator, and there's multiple copies made, gets a copy of the bill, and you have those attorneys in that process that vet the bill to begin with, and that draft the bill. So the figure I've seen is 70 million a year, and I also have, and I'll see if I can, if I have some follow-up material to send, whom should I send that to? Should I send that to Sharon?
Sure, that'd be fine, Tony.
Yeah.
And Tony, may we take a moment to hear from Matt, if he would like to speak to Matt McAuliffe? He
Yes,
is
sure.
another legislator.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I would be happy to.
Potential legislator.
No, I like the way you said it the first time. First, thank you for having me. I guess much like Tim, not having been out in Harrisburg, that is the kind of legislator I would like to be. I would like to be able to hear as many good ideas as possible, regardless of where they're coming from. And I do agree that it should not be just a handful of people that are able to slow that process down. I absolutely love the idea of having more discussion on these bills and getting a reduction in the overall number of bills that are written lowered. That would be great to get rid of some of that wasteful spending in government. But again, not being in Harrisburg yet, not being as aware of the rules that are put in place, I kind of need to get there and figure out what that process is. And I will 100% be available and open to having discussions, whether it's before the election or after, if I'm successful, and making this a more transparent process.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I have a question here. If a vote is taken on day one to pass the rules, who wrote the rules and when? The rules are written by the majority leaders in the House and the Senate. The House has its rules, Senate has its rules. So they write them, and there are only about, I believe it's 8 pages or so of rules. I may have that, I think I have that right. But anyway, they write them beforehand, and they've been the same, essentially, for the last 3 or 4 sessions. So the leadership, the majority leaders write the rules, and they write them to give the majority leaders control over the entire process. Okay, there are bills that have had half the legislators correspond. Yes, Fair Districts had a bill that had one over 50% of the House members co-sponsored the bill. and we couldn't, the bill was gutted in committee by the chair of the committee. So our bill never got a vote. Can we see the current rules anywhere? I believe they are available, and I will get that information to Sharon.
Tony, this is Julie Becker. I'm just going to mute myself and take advantage of being the host and being able to just jump in with my question. What incentive is there? I mean, I presume it'd be just political pressure, but what incentive is there for any legislator on day one to basically disallow themselves to amend the rules before they've heard them?
Well, as you heard the two candidates talking about this, if they hadn't come to this presentation, they wouldn't have known probably a question about the rules. And so they go in, new legislators, I think, go in blind, don't know about it. Leadership is telling them, just vote for this, it's procedural, don't worry about it, we do this all the time. And they trust and they vote. Legislators that have been there before, again, these rules protect the legislators from having to take difficult votes on difficult bills, because those difficult bills don't get out of committee. If you look at things like what flies through the House and the Senate, you know, the judicial gerrymandering bill, there was no clamor among the public to pass that, but the public's been clamoring for property tax reform for decades. It goes nowhere. But the judicial gerrymandering bill, the constitutional amendment, goes through the House and the Senate, has minutes of hearings, no expert testimony or anything like that on a constitutional amendment, and it flies through. And if they pass it again this session, and they can do that between now and November, it'll be on the ballot in an upcoming election. So the Faustian bargain is, okay, I can't really represent my constituents, but I don't have to take any difficult votes. And then I can just propose all this legislation and put it in my newsletter, and my constituents will think I'm doing something.
Okay, are there any further questions? I think if not.
Well, I have a question. What is you say you were about at 5% of the bills get passed. What is the percentage of other states? What is their, what percentage of their bills actually get passed?
I am not sure. I am not sure, but I can get that information, send it to Sharon, and she can, I believe, share it with everybody who's on this. Okay, great.
I would think that should be a part of your argument.
I would think so.
Compare us with other states, because if they're also at 5% or less, then maybe that's not a talking point. Maybe the talking point really should be the bills that are important, that actually have an impact on.
Oh yeah, yeah. The bill, but I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. My point is not that these bills are good. I think I specifically said I don't even think some of them are worth the paper they're written on. They're puffery. But bills with bipartisan support, good solutions deserve a vote. That's our argument. But you are absolutely right. Having a sense of what other states do, how the percentage of bills passed in other states, would be helpful to know.
Yeah.
And I will get that.
And to Tim and Matt, are you getting any pressure yet about having to abide by these rules or just sign off on these bills? Or are you just completely blind?
I'll be honest with you. I have not seen or thought or been approached about the House rules. Part of the reason that gravitates me here is redistricting reform, and so I'm sort of hearing the presentation as we go here today. I'm certified as a specialist in law and government, and so a lot of what I've done is I've worked on legislation drafting. I've worked on state constitutional law. I've read the House ethics rules, but I've honestly never been exposed to the rules of the House. I've never read them, so it's just hard to take a position one way or another when you haven't even read them. I haven't seen them, but I know that there's a problem. So when I wrote about redistricting reform in 2003, and sort of a general philosophy, of what I see going wrong with our democracy, some of the things that I think about are the fact that we've become this entertainment culture that doesn't necessarily put in the work to be good citizens. And that's partly from, the last 60 years of having TVs in every household and having, sort of information at our fingertips constantly that's not necessarily good information, but it's the internet. We have redistricting that sort of distorts I shouldn't say redistricting, I should say gerrymandering, that sort of dilutes the will of the people, so that and then you have these massive districts that have become sort of that you can't even have a responsive legislator. And then the other one that I always think of is strong party leadership and infinite amounts of dark money in politics. So I get that that strong party leadership tends to have a negative effect on the type of bills that you want. You want that are good government bills. So yeah, that is definitely a concern. But I've honestly never read them. I honestly have never read them. Haven't been approached about it. And the level of interest I have in redistricting reform is what brought me here to the something on the House rules.
Yeah, my point would be, again, whatever issue brings you here, whatever issue is important to you, property tax reform, the minimum wage, ballot access, redistricting reform, it's not going to get done, Tim, because of the rules. It's the biggest hole in the boat. It's not the only hole in the boat when it comes to democracy in Harrisburg, but it's the biggest. It is a foundational problem that has to be solved. And I hope that you will do some research, read those rules, and realize that if you're elected and you vote for those rules, you are giving up your voice to represent your constituents.
Okay, well, I'm looking at the time here, and any further questions by anyone? Okay. Well, first, I want to thank Tony for such an informative and eye-opening presentation. Tony, you have certainly provided tremendous valuable information to educate voters about the need for this reform. And I really believe that as more people learn of this, more pressure, I'm sure, will be put upon our legislators to create better rules. Thank you to all who have attended tonight, and please spread the word about this. Go to the FDPA website to find out all the ways, as Tony talked about earlier, that you can take action, including to gather petition signatures at the polls in November during the general election. And again, the Bucks County League of Women Voters invites you to join us. Anyone here who is not already a member of our league, please go to our website and consider joining to help us empower voters and protect our democracy. Thank you again, and have a great night.
Okay. And I'll be sending the rules and the number of bills passed to Sharon.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Tony. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming.